Let's go and look at the Duffers now that they can be looked at. They went into another room, which was full of polished instruments. Instruments hard to understand, such as astrolabes, orreries, chronoscopes, poisometers, buses, and theodolins. And here, when they had come to the window, the magician said, There are your Duffers." "I don't see anybody," said Lucy. "And what are those mushroom things?" The things she pointed at were dotted all over the level grass. They were certainly very like mushrooms, but far too big. The stalks about 3 feet high, with umbrellas about the same length from edge to edge. When she looked carefully, she noticed that the stalks joined the umbrellas not in the middle, but at one side, which gave the unbalanced look to them. And there was something, a sort of little bundle, lying on the grass at the foot of each stalk. In fact, the longer she gazed at them, the less like mushrooms they appeared. The umbrella part was not really round as she had thought at first. It was longer than it was broad, and it widened at one end. There were a great many of them, 50 or more. The clock struck 3. Instantly, the most extraordinary thing happened. Each of the mushrooms suddenly turned upside down. The little bundles which had lain on the bottom of the stalks were heads and bodies. The stalks themselves were legs, but not 2 legs to each body. Each body had a single thick leg right under it, not to one side like the leg of a one-legged man. And at the end of it, a single enormous foot, a broad-toed boot with toes curling up a little so that it looked rather like a small canoe. She saw in a moment why they had looked like mushrooms. They had been lying flat on their backs, each with its single leg straight up in the air and its enormous foot spread out above it. She learned afterward that this was their ordinary way of resting, for the foot kept off both rain and sun, and for a monopod to lie under its own foot is almost as good as being in a tent. "Oh, the funnies, cried Lucy, bursting into laughter. "Did you make them like that?" Yes, I made the Duffers into monopods," said the magician. He too was laughing, till the tears ran down his cheeks. "But watch," he added. It was worth watching, of course. These little one-footed men couldn't walk or run as we do. They got about by jumping like fleas or frogs, and what jumps they made, as if each big foot were a mass of springs, and with what a bounce they came down. That was what made the thumping noise which had so puzzled Lucy yesterday, for now they were all jumping in all directions and calling out to one another, "Hey, lads, we're visible again." "Visible we are," said one of the tasseled red cap, who was obviously the chief monopod. "And what I say is, when chaps are visible, why, they can see one another." "Oh, there it is, Chief," cried all the others. "There's the point. No one's got a clearer head than you. You couldn't have made it plainer." She caught the old man napping. "That little girl did," said the chief monopod. "We've beaten him this time." "Just when we were going to say ourselves," chimed the chorus. "You're growing stronger than ever today, Chief. Keep it up." "But do they dare to talk about you like that?" said Lucy. "They seemed to be so afraid of you yesterday. Don't they know you might be listening?" "That's one of the funny things about the Duffers," said the magician. "One minute they talk as if I ran everything and overheard everything, and was extremely dangerous. The next moment they think they can take me in by tricks that a baby would see through. Bless them." "Will they have to be turned back into their proper shape?" asked Lucy. "Oh, I do hope it would be unkind to leave them as they are. Do they really mind that much?" "They seem pretty happy, I say. Look at that jump. What were they like before?" "Common little dwarves," said he. "Nothing like so nice as the sort you have in Narnia." "It would be a pity to change them back," said Lucy. "They're so funny, and they're rather nice. Do you think it would make any difference if I told them that?" "I'm sure it would, if you could get it into their heads. Will you come with me and try?" No, you'll get on far better without me." "Thanks awfully for the lunch," said Lucy, and turned quickly away. She ran down the stairs which she had come up so nervously that morning. and and cannoned into Edmund at the bottom. All the others were there with him waiting, and Lucy's conscience smote her when she saw their anxious faces and realized how long she had forgotten them. "It's all right," she shouted. "Everything's all right. The magician's a brick. I've seen him, Aslan." After that, she went from them like the wind and out into the garden. Here the earth was shaking with the jumps of the air and the air ringing with the shouts of the monopods. Both were redoubled when they caught sight of her. Here she comes, they cried. 3 cheers for the little girl. Ah, she put it across the old gentleman properly, she did. And we're extremely regrettable, said the chief monopod, that we can't give you the pleasure of seeing us as we were before we were uglified. For you wouldn't believe the difference, and that's the truth, for there's no denying we're mortally ugly now, so we won't deceive you. That we are, Chief, that we are, echoed the others, bouncing like so many toy balloons. You said it. But I don't think you are at all, said Lucy, shouting to make herself heard. I think you look very nice. Hear, hear, said the monopods. True for you, Missy. Very nice we look. You couldn't find a handsomer lot. They said this without any surprise, and did not seem to notice that they had changed their minds. She's a saying, remarked the chief monopod, as how we looked very nice before we were uglified. True for you, Chief, true for you, chanted the others. That's what she says. We heard her ourselves. I did not, bawled Lucy. I said you're very nice now. So she did, said the chief monopod. Said we were very nice then. Hear 'em both, said the monopods. There's a pair for you, always right. They couldn't have put it better. But we're saying just the opposite, said Lucy, stamping her foot with impatience. So you are, to be sure, so you are, said the monopods. Nothing like an opposite. Keep it up, both of you. You're enough to drive anyone mad, said Lucy, and gave it up. But the monopods seemed perfectly contented, and she decided that on the whole the conversation had been a success, and before everyone went to bed that evening something else happened which made them even more satisfied with their one-legged condition. Caspian and all the Narnians went back as soon as possible to the shore to give the news to Rince and the others on board the Dawn Treader, who were by now very anxious. And of course the monopods went with them, bouncing like footballs and agreeing with one another in loud voices till Eustace said, I wish the magician would make them inaudible instead of invisible. He was soon sorry he had spoken, because then he had to explain what an inaudible thing is, something you can't hear, and though he took a lot of trouble, he never felt sure that the monopods really understood. And what especially annoyed him was that they had said at the end, he can't put things the way our chief does, but you'll learn, young man. Hark to him. He'll show you how to say things. There's a speaker for you. Then they reached the bay. Reepicheep had a brilliant idea. He had his little coracle lowered and paddled himself about in it till the monopods were thoroughly interested. He then stood up in it and said, Worthy and intelligent monopods, you do not need boats. Each of you has a foot that will do instead. Just jump as lightly as you can on the water and see what happens. The chief monopod hung back and warned the others that they'd find the water powerfully wet. Well, 1 or 2 of the younger ones tried it almost at once, and then a few others followed their example, and at last the whole lot did the same. It worked perfectly. A huge single foot of a monopod acted as a natural raft or boat, and when Reepicheep had taught them how to cut rude paddles for themselves, they all paddled about the bay and round the Dawn Treader, looking for all the world like a fleet of little canoes, with fat dwarfs standing up in the extreme stern of each. And they had races, and bottles of wine were lowered down to them from the ship, and prizes, and the sailors stood leaning over the ship's side and laughed till their own sides ached. The duffers were also very pleased with the name of monopods, which seemed to them a magnificent name, though they never got it right. That's what we are, they bellowed. Moneypods, Pumonods, Poddymons, just what it was on the tips of our tongues to call ourselves. But they soon got it mixed up with their old name of duffers, and finally settled down to calling themselves the Dufflepuds, and that is what they will probably be called for centuries. That evening all the Narnians dined upstairs with the magician, and Lucy noticed how different the whole top floor looked now that she was no longer afraid of it. The mysterious signs on the doors were still mysterious, but now looked as if they had kind and cheerful meanings, and even the bearded mirror now seemed funny rather than frightening. At dinner, everyone had by magic what everyone liked best to eat and drink, and after dinner, the magician did a very useful and beautiful piece of magic. He laid 2 blank sheets of parchment on the table and asked Drinian to give him the exact account of their voyage up to the date. And as Drinian spoke, everything he described came out of the parchment in fine, clear lines, till at last each sheet was a splendid map of the Eastern Ocean, showing Galma, Terebinthia, and the 7 Isles, the Lone Islands, Dragon Island, Burnt Island, Deathwater, and the land of the Duffers itself, all exactly on the right sizes and in the right positions. They were the first maps ever made of those seas, and better than any that had been made since without magic. For on these, though the towns and mountains looked at first just as they would on an ordinary map, when the magician lent them a magnifying glass, you saw that they were perfect little pictures of the real things, so that you could see the very castle, the slave market, and streets of Narrowhaven, all very clear, though very distant, look like things seen through the wrong end of a telescope. The only drawback was that the coastline of most of the islands was incomplete, for the map showed only what Drinian had seen with his own eyes. When they were finished, the magician kept one for himself and presented the other to Caspian. It still hangs in his chamber of instruments at Cair Paravel, but the magician could tell them nothing about seas or lands further east. He did, however, tell them about 7 years before a Narnian ship had put up in his waters, and that she had on board the lords Rivelian, Argaz, Mavromorn, and Roop. So they judged that the golden man they had been seen lying in Deathwater must have been Lord Restamar. Next day, the magician magically mended the stern of the Dawn Treader, where it had been damaged by the sea serpent, and loaded her with useful gifts. They were most friendly parting, and when she sailed 2 hours after noon, all the Dufflepuds paddled out with her to the harbor mouth and cheered until she was out of sound of their cheering. And that is the end of the chapter. Next chapter is chapter 12, The Dark Island. Woo!